The news on Gold FM.
The news headlines on Gold FM.
In your headlines, no QR code fuel pumping for petrol vehicles. China assures continuous fuel supply to Sri Lanka. Need implementation of durable structural revenue measures, urges ADB. US-Iran peace talks commences. US denies claims Washington agreed to unfreeze Iranian assets.
The top story on Gold FM.
The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation announced the suspension of the petrol QR quota system starting tonight. This will be in effect until midnight on the 18th of April. The measure was taken to accommodate festive travel. Despite this temporary relaxation, Chairman Janaka Rajakaruna confirmed during a press briefing in Colombo that the odd-even number plate system remains in full effect. He also commented on the fuel availability, and in the interest of clarity, we refrain from dubbing his remarks.
මේ දවස්වල වර්ෂාව අඩු වීමත් එක්ක බලාගාරවලට යම් ප්‍රමාණයක ඩීසල් යන හින්දා ඩීසල් වැඩිවීමක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපේ ක්‍රූඩ් නැවක් කියන එක නැති වුණා ගිය මාසේ අවසානයේ තිබිච්ච එක. ඒකත් එක්ක අර්බුදේ වැඩි වුණා. විශාල මුදලකට වැඩි මුදලකට තෙල් ලබා ගන්න වුණා. ඒ හින්දා තමයි අපිට තෙල් වැඩි කරන්න උනේ. අප්‍රේල් මාසේ අපි ෂෙඩියුල් කරලා තියෙනවා නැව් 12ක් එන්න පිරිපහදු කරපු නැව් 13 වෙනිදා අපිට එනවා ෆර්නස් ඔයිල් 30000ක්. ඒක තමයි අපේ විදුලි බලය සඳහා පිරිපහදුව නැතිවීම හින්දා අපිට හදිසියේ ගන්න වෙච්ච තෙල් එක. ඒ වුණාම අපිට විදුලිය කප්පාදුවකින් තොරව ඉස්සරහට යන්න පුළුවන්. මේ වෙනකොට තහවුරු කරපු නැව් ටික ගත්තොත් ඩීසල් යන්න පුළුවන් මේ මාසේ අවසානයේ වෙනකන් 92 පෙට්‍රල් යන්න පුළුවන් ජුනි මාසේ අවසන් වෙනකන් 95 යන්න පුළුවන් ජුනි මාසේ අවසන් වෙනකන්. සැපයුම මෙහෙම වුණාට මිල අඩුවක් වෙලා නැහැ. පෙට්‍රල් ඩීසල් වල මිල පුරවගත නීතියෙන්නේ මේ අර්බුදයේ විසඳුණත් යම් කාලයක් යනකන් යම් ප්‍රමාණයක වැඩිවීමක් තියේවි කියලා. ඇත්තටම ජනතාව වැඩිපුර පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ පෙට්‍රල්. ඒකින්ද අපි තීන්දුව කරා අද මධ්‍යම රාත්‍රියේ ඉඳලා 18 වෙනිදා දක්වා කාලය තුල පෙට්‍රල් වලට විතරක් QR එක ඉවත් කරා. හැබැයි ඩීසල් වලට ඒ සාහනය දෙන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ. 18 වෙනිදාගෙන් පස්සේ නැවත වතාවක් ඉන්ධන කෝටාව QR එක පරණ විදිහටම ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා. මොකද ඒකේ සංශෝධනයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඔත්තීරත්ෙත් අනිවාර්යෙන්ම බලනවා. ඉවත් කරන්නේ පෙට්‍රල් සඳහා QR එක විතරයි.
This is the local news on Gold FM.
China will ensure a continuous fuel supply to Sri Lanka through Sinopec. We also believe that the Sri Lanka government take care of China's concerns. These remarks were expressed by Chinese ambassador to the island, Qi Zhenhong. He said this while addressing media during a visit to Kandy to invoke a blessing from the chief prelates of the Malvatta and Asgiriya chapters. He first commented on China's relationship with Sri Lanka.
The Chinese friendship policies towards Sri Lanka is face all the parties, all the religious beliefs, all the areas. Yeah, we always keep good relations with different parties in the history of Sri Lanka. Our relationship based on the mutual understanding, mutual respect. We help Sri Lanka. We also hope Sri Lanka government and the people take care of China's concerns.
The Chinese envoy also explained their support to Sri Lanka in the wake of the war in the Middle East.
We help Sri Lanka government from a macro perspective. We work hard to how to persuade some related parties to ceasefire. This is a route to stop the oil supply crisis. The second is that the China Sinopec companies will do their best. They have the ability to ensure uninterrupted the supply for his market shares. The third is Chinese government will provide necessary fuel support to Sri Lanka.
Government must ensure that durable structural revenue measures are in place to continue the gains achieved last year. This is the view of the Asian Development Bank during their launch of the Asian Development Outlook April 2026 in Colombo. Speaking to media, Lakshmi Fernando, Principal Economics Officer of the regional lender, highlighted a number of issues related to the Sri Lankan economy. One such was tourist arrivals. According to the central bank data, the first 3 months of the year saw the arrival of 740,634, an increase compared to the same period last year, which is 229,298. However, this year's March figure was 183,979, some 37,000 reduction compared to March last year, which is 229,298. If the war continues, Fernandes said that the figures will continue to decline in the coming months.
If you look at the March numbers, March 26 compared to 2025, arrivals fell 20%. It reached about 184,000, again, not meeting the government's targets. But what you see is, even though the Middle East tourists don't account for a large percentage, it is those who use the Gulf airspaces as their last point of departure to come to Sri Lanka that are really affecting. So given that airspaces in Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah were closed for quite some time, this impact is an early sign, and we do expect this to deteriorate further in the next couple of months. Of course, the good thing is we are going into the off-season period, so that may help a little. But from about May, June onwards, you see the early bookings for the winter season coming up. And a couple of factors, right? You've got high airline prices now, you've got global uncertainty, you've got escalation of prices, which will all factor into tourist arrivals for this year. So this is an area that we are keeping an eye out on as well. So overall, I think over the winter season, we may see some declines coming in unless the situation is not as prolonged as we anticipate.
Foreign remittances in March, despite the war, was recorded at $254 million, an increase from $205 million compared to the same period last year. $2.29 billion were recorded in the first 3 months, a surge from $1.8 billion compared to the corresponding period last year. However, ADB forecasts a slowdown in the near future.
What we will keep an eye out on is if there is a further slowdown in remittances, although remittances have done well this year so far, given that we're going into a period of interest repayments coming up following the debt restructuring, any sort of slowdown in forex inflows could impact our reserve numbers here.
The ADB's principal economics officer then highlighted the necessity of sustaining the revenue growth achieved last year.
Last year we saw revenue was exceedingly high and it beat all expectations, but it's important to also understand the part vehicle imports played in this, and that's just a one-off revenue gain there. And this year it's important that the government also looks at a more durable structural revenue measure in order to ensure that administratively there are strong methods to sort of continue this great performance that the government has actually taken. And again, I'd just like to emphasize that the delays in structural reform, implementation and any sort of fatigue in policy implementation is something that the country cannot afford at this point of time. We also need to ensure that we don't undermine private sector investments at this point. The government has to show the confidence and to ensure that that investment-led growth is there and remains to support Sri Lanka at this juncture.
Secretary to the President Nandika Sananth Kumar Nayaka lodged a formal complaint with the CID demanding a comprehensive inquiry into coal imports dating back to 2009. This action follows persistent allegations of financial irregularities highlighted in audit reports and parliamentary debates. Leader of the House, Minister Bimal Ratnayake, confirmed in Parliament yesterday that a special presidential commission of inquiry led by Supreme Court Justice will soon begin investigating all coal procurement activities from the last 17 years. With only 2 days remaining before the Sinhala and Tamil New Year, citizens across the country prepare for the traditional festivities. Major transport terminals, including the Colombo Central Bus Stand, Fort Railway Station and Markumbara Multimodal Centre, report massive crowds of travellers heading to their hometowns. The Sri Lanka Transport Board chairman noted that 1,490 buses departed the capital for provincial destinations within the last 24 hours under a special festive service. While the railway department operates extra trains on most lines, services on the main line remain restricted due to damage from Cyclone Ditwa. During the day, many commuters at central hubs expressed frustration over significant delays and a shortage of available transport.
Now for some news in brief.
The Ministry of Public Administration announced that steps have been taken to keep government offices open on the 15th, 16th and 17th of April.
The business news on Gold FM.
The United States Treasury reported a March budget deficit of $164 billion. This marks a 2% increase from the previous year. This rise stems primarily from a surge in individual and corporate tax refunds following recent legislative changes alongside increased relief payments to farmers. While initial defense spending for the conflict in Iran rose by only $2 billion this month, officials expect significantly higher costs in the near future as the military replaces weaponry used in the field. Senate Democrats currently estimate the war's total expenditure at $44 billion. Although many citizens receive larger tax refunds due to new deductions on overtime and interest, economists warn that soaring fuel prices linked to the Middle East conflict likely offset these financial gains for most households.
International news on Gold FM.
Talks have started between the US and Iran on ceasefire. According to foreign media, they are still indirect, though through Pakistani mediators for the moment. This morning, the US and Iranian delegations have both met Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in separate talks ahead of peace negotiations. Iran and the US have agreed to a conditional 2-week ceasefire, but discussions today will be a chance for both sides to discuss the key sticking points. Foreign media reports that it is fair to say that a whole mountain of obstacles lie ahead. US media is reporting that an American official has denied any frozen Iranian assets have been released, despite earlier reports to the contrary. Iran's Speaker of Parliament Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who is leading the delegation earlier, said this would need to happen before negotiations could even begin. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says massive numbers of empty oil tankers are heading to the US to load up with the best and sweetest oil and gas anywhere in the world. In a recent post on Truth Social, Trump claims the US have more oil than the next 2 largest oil economies combined and higher quality. This comes as global oil prices have fluctuated during the US-Israel war with Iran.
Entertainment news on Gold FM.
Sentebale, the African charity co-founded by Prince Harry in 2006 in honor of his late mother Princess Diana, filed a defamation lawsuit against him and former trustee Mark Diab at London's High Court. It identified them as the architects of an adverse media campaign that triggered cyberbullying against the charity and its leadership. The legal action follows Harry and Prince Siyaso of Lesotho's departure from the charity in March 2025, citing an irreparably broken relationship with the chair of the board. The charity, which focuses on young people's health, wealth inequality and climate resilience in Lesotho and Botswana, said the campaign caused significant operational disruption and reputational harm. Harry and Dyer categorically rejected the claims, saying it was extraordinary that charitable funds were being used to soothe the very people who built and supported the organization for nearly 2 decades.
Sports news on Gold FM.
Sri Lanka A secured a 4-wicket win against New Zealand A in the third and final unofficial one-day international at the Surya Vavar Stadium. Batting first, the New Zealanders reached a total of 302 for 7 within their allotted 50 overs. Sri Lanka A successfully chased the target, scoring 303 for the loss of 6 wickets in just 46.2 overs. That's it for the news. I'm Atik Rumi. Have a great evening.